any technical issues or questions, and any questions you want answered, please use the chat feature below for those. At this time, I wanted to introduce our president of the Massachusetts PTA, Madison Estes. If you want.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I'll just take a quick minute because I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I'm so excited to hear from each of you. So I'm Madison Estes. I'm the current president of the Massachusetts PTA, also a special education teacher, and served on a few different roles on this board. And, really after, being on the board, the advocacy passion has grown, and Susan has done a great job with our legislative efforts the past few years. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, we are passionate about advocacy here at Massachusetts PTA, and advocacy is the core of PTA. The PTA is the oldest child advocacy association in the United States, and we believe that advocacy is a process, not an event. It is a continuation. It needs commitment and courage. Advocacy is about supporting someone or something. It's about proposing or recommending someone or something, and it is about achieving specific outcomes. Advocacy also implies identifying a cause, believing in it, and mobilizing others to help influence and support a change in policy or program that is negatively affecting your cause. The Massachusetts PTA has an advocacy committee made up of volunteers that steer our legislative efforts and collaborate with community partners. Our mission is to actively support federal, state, and local initiatives that will support every child in reaching their potential. We advocate for PTA priorities and let our members of Congress know what is important to our students and families here in Massachusetts. We represent all of you. We use our voices for active change. In times of insurmountable challenges, we remain the persistent voice and constant leader. During the current health pandemic, the PTA has been at the forefront of advocating for what is in the best interest for our children and families. The PTA supports measures that will ensure that every child's potential can become a reality. PTA advocates have been working hard for the advancement on issues that impact students, families, and schools. Advocacy is what sets PTA apart from other organizations. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our first member of the panel, who will tell us a little bit about himself, and then he'll speak to us about advocacy from his point of view and what his constituents can do best to advocate. So Senator Paul Feeney, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's great to be here. And thank you, Madam President, as well. It's great to be on here and to have so many people take time out of their busy schedule and their nights to do this. And I think Susan says it, says it right. It's about advocacy, right? The PTA and the work that you do in elevating the voices of students and educators and bringing people together around a shared set of values, that's great when it's more than just words on paper. And when you can actually go and advocate and make a difference and make a change, that's when you take all these kind of abstract theories and discussions and you make a difference. And certainly as a legislator, people look at us and they say, well, what are you doing? What are you doing to make a difference? What are you doing to change things for the better? And for me, as somebody who, for 20 years was a blue collar worker, who never thought that I would end up in the Massachusetts State Senate, who found my niche in really sticking up for people in the workplace, as well as in my own community. For me as a legislator to look out and see the Massachusetts PTA and others that take an active role in saying, you know what, it's not enough that we just talk about these issues. We're not a think tank. We're actually going to go and make a difference. To me, that's what government's all about. And it's not about what, strictly how I vote or what I'm doing at the State House, but it's about what I can do to empower others to be able to be a voice for themselves and lift up the voices of people in their own community. So I always want to take the opportunity to encourage that. And I think, Susan and I have had great discussions over these last few years about the best way to go about doing that. And as somebody who, even prior to my service in the state Senate, and I think most people would say probably as a state senator, I always tell people I'm a professional agitator. That's what I do. We know how to shake the trees and who to go to get things done. But there's value to that. There really is. So I just want to take a couple minutes, and I look forward to a discussion and hearing from the other panelists as well, and to be here with former Representative St. Fleur, who I grew up in Boston, and to watch Representative St. Fleur and the way she represented her constituents was inspirational to me. And of course, with Adeline B, who does so much work on behalf of students and educators down in my district as well and across the Commonwealth. Look, we have an opportunity here, an opportunity that unfortunately was born by challenges. Certainly nobody had a playbook for the last year in what we've faced with the pandemic. We got into a situation last year where, you all know, because you were a part of it, we had to triage the different issues that were coming up. Initially, it was about, what does this virus actually mean? What does the science tell us? What is the limited amount of data that we have tell us about this virus? And then it became a discussion about PPE, whether or not we could function safely in schools. If we weren't going to be able to, how those schools were going to shut down. You can't just flip a switch. There has to be some sort of plan. Right. And we got into these discussions about, really trying to just day to day and almost minute to minute, trying to triage a lot of the issues that came as a result, not only of the public health crisis, but the mitigation that we needed to undergo because of it. Well, we've done that now for the better part of a year, and or actually over a year at this point. And one of the things that has been clear to me is that there can't be just unilateral decision making. That it's not a one size fits all problem. And unfortunately, I think it took a pandemic for many people, especially policymakers, to realize that you cannot function effectively if you are making unilateral decisions without bringing stakeholders to the table to find out what works in each particular case. Each particular case, I mean, in school districts, as well as for each child, right? It's not a one size fits all issue when we talk about education. We know that in order to nurture the whole child, that we have to take all sorts of things into account, right? We have to take wealth into account. We have to take race into account. We have to take background, frame of reference, where people are from, right? Their family situations. And I think a lot of times we get into this kind of bubble in this silo of education policy. Unfortunately, we listen to the think tanks and people say, well, this is the latest model and this is how you do it. And we lose sight of the fact that, we're really not doing any favors to the students by doing that and to our families. So we've gone through this now for a year. We've triaged a lot of the issues. We're now starting to turn the corner and realize, okay, schools are going to start to open back up. What does that mean, right? What does it mean to a family? Do they have the necessary enablers to, just transportation in place? Do we have, are there special education? What's that going to look like, right? All these different things that need to be considered now. And for educators who have come to me and said, look, Senator, we want to make sure that we're getting back into the classroom. That's in our DNA. That's what we do. We want to teach. We want to get back into the classroom and do this. But as the voice of our students, we also want to make sure that we're doing it safely. And, I filed a bill that would accomplish that. And that looks at kind of HVAC and, all sorts of different things in the classroom and spacing and all that. But that's the how and the what, right? We know where we need to get to. We know that we need to be able to reopen our classroom safely, and we need to do it so that our educators are safe, our administrators are safe, our students are safe, and that they're coming home safely each day to our families. So that's the how and the what. But I always like to focus on the why, especially when I'm talking to groups like you and people like you that do this work and that advocate on a daily basis. Over the last couple of years when I've met with Mass PTA, I always talk about how I'm a fan of Simon Sinek, noted author and speaker who does this great TED Talk if anybody wants to go on. And of course, after this panel tonight, when you have some time, and go check out Simon Sinek's TED Talk about starting with your why and focusing on your why and how important that is. And I will tell you as a state senator that when, we have legions of advocates and lobbyists and all sorts of people that knock on our door and come to speak with us, but the most powerful advocacy out there is when somebody comes in and tells their story. When you connect with a legislator or a policymaker on that very human level and say, this is why it's important to me. This is why I'm fighting for the things that I'm fighting for. And you bring out those pictures of your children, and you bring out those, family photos, and you tell those stories of experiences, those lived experiences that you and your family have gone through. That is the most powerful thing that you can do when you're advocating like you are. So I urge you, and I know this year is different, and I just want to talk briefly about that, but I know this year is different, but focus on your why. Tell your stories, tell your experiences. We hear from folks all the time that come in with, with the data and the studies and this is what we need to do, and these are the statutes we need to affect. But when you come in and tell the stories about what you've gone through and where you want to be, that is the most powerful thing you can do. And I think it's responsible for me, ended up in the state Senate, because I've been, effectively telling my story of, my life, and I think that people connect with that. So continue to do that. And I would just say, as a bit of advice, and Susan asked me if I could just talk briefly about, kind of the most effective way, especially now. We've had very successful, PTAs have very successful legislative lobbying days in the past. Where you've come up to the State House, you've knocked on doors, you've had events, and you've had those one-on-one discussions with your representatives and senators. This year, obviously, is a little bit different. The State House is closed to the public. I myself have been working remotely, as well as my staff most of the time. So we don't have that opportunity. But even with that challenge, it creates opportunity to have even more discussions. Now that we're in this virtual world and everybody's on Zoom, many of my colleagues have been doing office hours virtually through Zoom. I do it once a month. I hear from people in my district about a whole host of issues, and I encourage you to do that. Find out when your representatives and your senators are holding their virtual office hours, sign up, and go in and tell your story. Focus on your why. I'll say that, despite the fact that we're all getting probably a little bit tired of looking at everybody in these virtual boxes, it does create some opportunity. There's no, as I like to call it, windshield time. You don't have to drive, 2.5 hours into Boston to come meet with us, but to really connect with us on a one-on-one level. So do that. Take advantage of that. We are in a very, very busy time in our legislative session. You know that, but that creates opportunity for us, and especially for all of you, the advocates of our students, of our families, of our educators. When you come in and you talk to us, or you sign up on Zoom for our office hours and talk to us, we listen. You have compelling stories to tell. And I would say that as we go through this legislative session, we're just in our third month. We just started the 192nd legislative session early this January. Committees are up and running. Bills have yet to get a bill number. Dockets have yet to been given a bill number, so they haven't been assigned to committee yet. They will be in the next couple of weeks, so pay attention to that. Once your legislative agenda is ready to go, start reaching out and get on the phone with us, or get on the Zoom with us. And I will just finish with saying that our budget season is underway. Despite the fact that last year it got a little bit sideways because we weren't sure what the revenue was going to be. This year it seems that revenue is exceeding projections, which is good, and we're going ahead with our normal budget season. That means the House is going to be putting out their budget in the next couple of weeks. They'll have debate towards the end of April, and then the Senate will take it up in May. And you've all heard me say it many, many times before. If you haven't, a budget really is a statement of our values. It's our collective values as a Commonwealth. And you need to make sure, and we need to make sure, that we're elevating the voices of students from every community in every district across the Commonwealth. Not just picking one or two, but realizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but that we really have to look deeply into our districts, talk to our families, talk to our educators, and figure out what we need to do going forward. The pandemic was eye-opening for many, many people. It's because it exposed so many inequities in the system, from healthcare through education. Now, we're going to get into some pretty weighty discussion over the next year about things like MCAS and standardized testing. We're going to get into discussions about food insecurity, which, oh my God, right? I mean, what did we do when we first realized that we had to shut down schools last year? The first thing we had to worry about was food insecurity in many of our communities throughout the Commonwealth. Didn't matter where you were, that problem existed. So we're going to get into these discussions over the next year, and you want to make sure that you have a seat at the table because there is nobody more deserving. So I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Please reach out. I'm going to be here all night, but you guys know how to find me, and I want to make sure everybody has my cell phone number and can find me 24/7, especially as we go through the budget over the next couple months. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great advice. At this time, I'd like to introduce Marie St. Fleur. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself. We're so thankful to have you with us tonight.
Good evening. It's great to see everyone. I don't think I've been on a panel like this in a long time. So thanks for inviting me. And Senator, it's great to see you, and wonderful to hear the work that you're doing up on the Hill. And Laura, Perez, my hat off to you for the work that you and Mass Advocates continues to do for children who are often unseen and unheard. And so appreciate you all. I was asked, actually, as I was listening to the senator speak, I was asked to talk about, advocacy from a parent, essentially, perspective. I think it's what we talked about. So I'll touch on that a little bit, but I probably will harp on the policy piece just a little bit. And given as I look at who's on this panel, I realize most of you are connected to the PTA. I don't know how many are parents, really. And so, okay, so you do have some parents on there. So okay, well, everybody's a parent, but you're all a PTO member. So when I was asked, so I was thinking about, and I had mentioned to Adeline at the time, I'm not certain because, I'm a Catholic school kid, and I'll tell you my story. I'm a Catholic school kid. My English is not my first language. My parents immigrated here when I was, they immigrated before I came. And so English was not their first language. And my mother gave me this advice years ago when I started having my children. And she said, you are your child's first and last line of defense. And that's it. No one knows your kid like you do. So when you go up there, don't have anybody tell you what your kid is. You define for the individual what your kid is. It's the best advice I ever gotten, and I've always held on to that. They're all grown up now, out of college and off living their lives. And what she also explained to me is, just because you don't know what's going on academically doesn't mean that you cannot help your kid. Because I remember her going to St. Patrick's with broken English and tell them exactly what she thought when they said they were going to put me, because, they used to track us back in the old days. And, some of us were going to college and some of us were going to go and be secretaries. I mean, when you were in Catholic school, that essentially was the track. And she went to them and said, no, my girl's going to college. She's not going to secretary school. She's going to college. Because they didn't even ask, they just tracked. And so that's what it means when you have an advocate, and didn't even know that that's what it was called at the time, but there was a power in her that allowed her to do that. And as a result of that, it afforded me a platform which allowed me to do had many amazing experiences in my life. And so what I tell, and I say that to everybody still today, a parent is the child's first and last line of defense. The teacher is a partner. The parent brings their child to the school. The teacher is a partner in that work. And in a partnership, you all have to understand each other's roles and have to respect each other's roles. And I think that's where the mix-up happens sometimes, is that parents bring the child and say, okay, here you go, take care of it. And then teachers don't know what to do with all of it. And so really resetting that table and making certain that we all understand what each other's role is, and that as a parent, I get the benefit of having a team of experts. A team of experts is going to help me meet my objective. And that objective is making sure that my kid gets the best quality education that I can afford or that I can access, right? Depending upon where you are. And that we are going to respect each other's expertise, and we're going to bring that to the table to support the kid. But one of the things we have to do with parents is also help them with the rules of the road. Because how many people actually give that handbook? Is there a handbook that's given to a parent? How many parents actually read that handbook to understand what the rules are for the school? Most of them have no clue, and it's not even often talked to them. And most parents, particularly if you're talking to parents who English is not their primary language, who didn't come up in the system here, they have no idea that you have that resource available. We assume people know when they don't. And so something happens to their kid, they show up and they're angry, they're frustrated because they're thinking that things are happening to their kid that shouldn't be happening, but we haven't taken the time to actually acclimate that parent to the school as well to help them understand what tools are available so that they can understand the rules and regulations. So we have to take some time and create a baseline. At the same time, you as a teacher has to help me understand what is your baseline, because I want to know about my kid. I want to know how my kid's day went. I want to know what went well and what didn't go well. You may not want to see or hear from me every day. I may have the tendency to want to do that. Don't want you to be upset about it, but just understand that's that involved parent. And at the same time, you're dealing with maybe 20, 25 kids and 25 or 30 or so parents, so it gets to be a bit much. So you have to be able to establish that baseline for the parent and come to some understanding about how we're going to communicate. And that is an absolutely important role for all of us to understand. And I also encourage parents to talk to your child, listen to your child, don't prejudge. Because the child's going to come home and say 1 or 2 or 3 things, and you're going to listen, and you're going to then go find out and then listen to the teacher and the administrator, whoever it is, and then make a decision. Because you know what? We're all looking at it from our own perspective, and maybe after you've had the conversation with them both, you're going to be able to come to some decisions. And sometimes, like I used to tell my child, well, guess what, honey? It's an attitude change. Maybe what you're having here is going to have an attitude change. It wasn't so much what Miss X did. There's an attitude change that we have to visit. And we're going to talk about how that attitude change is going to happen. The other thing is I rule my house, not you. So that was it. I'm an old school kind of girl. So that's just the way it went. Okay. And so and it was clear. Rules are, kids need structure. They need to know what's supposed to happen at home, and they need to know what's supposed to happen in school. And us as adults have to be helpful in helping them guide that. And so, and sometimes when they're right, we have to show up for them. And so we have to let that teacher know. One of the things that my mother, I appreciated that as well, never disrespected an adult in front of me. I didn't even know that they had an issue until it was after the fact. And I think we've lost that in conversations now. We have all sorts of conversations, and then we take power away from adults when we don't realize we're doing that. When you go after a teacher in front of a child a certain way, you're modeling for that child how it is that they're supposed to act. And you model it and you leave them in the classroom with the teacher. And so we have to think about what we're modeling when we do that. So attitude and behavior on both sides matter. And then I always say, build a community. I encourage parents to build a community for themselves. I don't know everybody in the school. I don't have the answers to everything, but other parents may have had similar experiences. So create a community for yourself. And then respect everybody. Respect everybody in the school, because you know what? That lunch lady may be the one looking out for your child. You never know. I had a son, a black son. And I'm gonna tell you, when they turn a certain age, things change for them in school. And particularly if they are the only black child in the classroom. And it is a very difficult place. Imagine yourself as an adult trying to work through that, and then having a kid having to try to figure out how to manage that. So you need to have a village in that school that's going to be able to support that child, and you never know where it's going to come from. And sometimes everybody at that school has value, and it's not simply the teacher in the classroom. Everyone has value. Everyone supports the healthy development of that child. And that person, you never know who it is, might be the one that's going to be able to give him that hug for you when he's having that bad day, that's going to be able to redirect him for you when he's so frustrated and can't explain what's going on to them. It might be that person. So we need to think about the school community, not simply the teacher, but the para, the receptionist, the lunch lady. Everybody is part of making certain, and we need to be able to think about that. And then we encourage parents to talk to their pediatricians and other people in their lives to support the children. Help them understand what the kids are supposed to learn, right? Because I may be able to get that syllabus and know exactly what I'm going to do with it and how I'm going to monitor it for the rest of the semester and know what I'm supposed to do for it every couple of weeks, when I'm going to check in and how I'm going to check in. But not every parent has that capacity, not because they don't want to, because they don't have, sometimes they don't, if you're working 2 jobs, like some folks are working 2 jobs, and your English is not your primary language, again, we've got to take the time, slow it down, and try to make this system work for families. And every family is different, every child is different. The system is us. I always love when people talk about the system, the system. The system is us. It's a set of rules that we've agreed to, and then we act on those rules. So if we want to disrupt the system, we have to disrupt our own actions and activities to make it work for children and families. So that's what I want to, so help them understand what it is that the child is supposed to be learning. And then it's going to be different, right? It's going to be whether the kind of communication you're going to have with that parent and the teacher is going to have is going to be based upon what's happening with the kid, whether it's a behavior issue, a grades issue, how are they doing? Are they on track? Are they falling behind? Is there a crisis? Because what happens in school impacts what happens at home. What happens at home definitely impacts what happens in school. And so taking a moment to have that conversation with the parent, I think when something is off, because you know when the kid is off, don't wait for the week to go by. Don't wait for 2 or 3 days to go by. Have that conversation now. And if you don't have the time to have that conversation now, thank God for emails right now. Thank God for text. Drop it so that and hold it there so that it doesn't get lost. Because for that kid, if it doesn't get resolved, they carry it with it and it shows up, perhaps not the next day, but the following day, because the matter was never resolved for them. So when you talk about how you're going to advocate for your child, I mean, when you have a child who needs with special needs, and Laura's going to talk about that, the system creates a team that's able to then help that parent and that child navigate. Most parents don't get that team. They have to create it. And so we have to be patient in allowing them to help them create that. And so as the parent looks at, let them ask the questions, help them learn how to gather information so they have that information to be able to advocate for the child efficiently, and help them in their problem solving, be patient with them in their problem solving. And parents, ask questions. I don't care how crazy you think it is. There's no stupid question. As long as it impacts your child, you ask the question, because that's what that school is there for, to help you with that. Ask the question, and if it can be resolved like that, then let it be resolved, And then parents, be an active listener, put your emotions aside, because when it's your kid, there's a couple things that happen. Either you come in ready, right? We are ready to come fight for this kid. Or else you're so scared because you know what? Whatever culture you're coming from, that teacher is God, right? That was supposed to be the learned one, and you're afraid to express how you really feel. And so I encourage parents, put your emotions aside, put your discomfort aside, put any shame that you feel about not being able to pronounce the words appropriately or use the right vocabulary, put it aside. Ask your question, because you're the only one who can ask it for the kids. Kids, as you and I both know, they are navigating a significant amount of things, right? It's not simply the academics, it's the social and emotional that they're all navigating. And lovely teachers get to have them for more time out of the day than we do. And so we need to be real partners, and we need to be able to hear each other and support each other to make certain we get to the end goal. That is a well-rounded young person who actually leaves your classroom with a love of learning, who comes home anxious to figure out how they go back next year. And that's what we want to do. And in every school now, the buzzword is family engagement. We've got all this money going out for family engagement. We've got a whole department that's set up now in the state for family engagement. Let's start with just basic respect and just talking to folks, and that'll get us a long way to get into the family engagement piece that we're talking about. So we need so every school district has a website. That website will probably give you a tool on all what their family engagement protocol is and what the resources are available. The Department of Education has their Office of Student and Family Support that you can actually go to as well and take a look at how they think about it. I think Worcester actually gives you a little diagram, the district, of how to resolve issues that you might have, starting with the teacher and then escalating it up. So you can find that, and if you could share that with parents, that would be terrific. And so as I guess when I leave in terms of a parent, remember your role, respect the teacher's role, have set it up at the very beginning what your communication platform is going to be so that you're able to connect with each other, all right? And at the end of the game, adults, get your egos out the way. It's about the kid, and let's make certain the kid's okay. That's kind of the way that I've always operated, and I still operate off that piece. As we take a look at policy, I agree with Senator Feeney, and I'll leave the big policy questions to my partners on the panel, but I agree with the issue of storytelling. Folks should be creating a storytelling bank. That storytelling bank so that you can share, so that you have a collection of stories that you have videotaped, right? That parents have that you can share with your legislators. You can still have those legislative breakfasts, right? Imagine, but now you can have them, cute little thing. You can have your legislative breakfast, identify who it is that you want to have, send them the breakfast, get somebody to order. Grubhub is wonderful. They have to show up, right? Grubhub is wonderful. Order it, send it to them, and say that you're going to be on there with them from 8 to 10. Bring the parents in, bring 20 parents in, bring them breakfast that day, coffee and a donut. Folks would love it. It's special, and it takes them out of having to deal with it. You still have that legislative breakfast budget. Use it in a certain way to be able to get to your parents. Use your social media effectively. Don't and use for parents. The text is an amazing thing. Get that list of phone numbers and text to parents. And then finally, as COVID, just revealed who we are. Because I've been in this business for too long, and it's not that we didn't know. We chose to ignore it. We chose to ignore it. When I look and saw lines of folks in line for food in America, and in Boston, everywhere, we knew this. We chose to ignore it. So the question is, do we go back and hide in our little worlds again, or do we say never again? And I think we all should say never again. And so it's not about making the system work. It's really about how we reset it. How we reset it so that it's more humane, it's more respectful of all the people that we talk about. That's what we have to do. Then there's all this money that's pouring in, supposedly it will be used for one time. Don't let that happen. Let us figure out how we use those dollars to reset and put the system back on track so that it works for people again. That's what I'm gonna beg you to do. I spend a lot of time on early learning. That's why I spend a lot of my time right now. Massachusetts is going to get about $500 million, 500, in early learning. That's essentially what they get anyway from the federal government normally. Okay, so are we just going to filter it away for a one-time thing? No, let's figure out how we use those dollars in a way that's going to shift the system and really build a system that's taking into account all children, because we either going to do that, or we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And what we're doing right now in early learning in particular is perpetuating discrimination and segregation. Because if all you're doing is looking at what a subsidy will do, and that's how you build your system, then what you're doing is by de facto, you're sending kids to be in siloed classroom based upon what they can afford. And we all should not be creating that world. All right, we've done it wrong, and we're trying to fix it in elementary and high school. Let's get it done right on the front end right now. And let's use those dollars in order to reset the system. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much. That was great. Laura Perez is also with us tonight as a panelist for Mass Advocates. And Laura, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Although I feel like Marie said a lot of things for me already. And thank you for your kind words about Massachusetts Advocates for Children, Marie. But thanks for having me here. Very nice meeting all of you. And again, I'm with Massachusetts Advocates for Children. I'm Laura Perez. I'm a parent advocate. We are a nonprofit organization based in Boston. We cover the whole state. Our mission is to make sure that all students have equity in education and remove the barriers in education for children across Massachusetts. So in terms of what would be the, the advocacy tips that we would, suggest to parents, number one would be communicate. Not only communicate just for the sake of saying something, but learn who to communicate to, when, and how. We find that sometimes parents come to us and say, well, the school is not listening to me, and then who have you been reaching out to? And it's the same person over and over again. So it's like, okay, there are certain things that we talk about with the teacher. So there are things you need to bring up to the special education director. Some other things you need to address with the principal. So know who is in the team, know who is in your team's education at school, and know that you can reach out to many different people. And then how to communicate. Have you been just making a phone call, or are you putting things in writing? Are you sending emails? What tools are you using to communicate with the school in order to advocate for your child? And when? When is the right time? As Marie was saying, don't wait until the last minute. Don't feel like, oh yeah, it will be fine, and I'm sure they'll work it out, or something will come up. And if you feel like something is not working, that something is off, then please communicate. Go and send that email and reach out and escalate and do everything you possibly can to communicate what your concerns are as a parent. The second one would be an expert on your child. That means, what is your child's profile? Every single kid is different. Even kids with a disability and kids who have the same disability, they're all different. So become the expert. Know your child's strengths, know your child's challenges. Sometimes when we have kids with special needs, school can be a little bit too focused on the challenges and the different things that are going on. Let's also talk about the strengths. Be that parent that knows your child's profile and say, I know who my child is. I know his unique or her unique profile, and this is what he or she needs. If it's a diagnosis, what is it about the diagnosis? Don't be shy about asking questions. If some of our kids with a diagnosis, then they go for evaluations, and then we meet with the doctor, or we meet with a special education director in school, and everybody's talking about all these words about the new diagnosis and all these acronyms, and it's a lot to process. It's a lot of information, and many of us don't know. I have my own young adult with autism, and I remember the first time that he got the diagnosis, it was like they were speaking Chinese to me. So it's about asking questions. Excuse me, I don't understand that. What does that mean? Would you repeat that? Could you explain that in a different way? What do you mean that is this diagnosis on this other diagnosis? But just make sure that your voice is important, and then you have the right to ask any questions. The number three, I think is a especially important one now with COVID and the kids going back to school, but it's obtain objective data and gather other information. What does that mean? If you have your child and you're trying to advocate for a specific thing, what data do you have? Go and find a professional, an expert, have an evaluation, your observations at home. COVID has been so hard for our kids, but if anything, it has given families an unique opportunity to observe your children learning. I know for so many parents it was difficult because they had to work and at the same time, juggle with the kids learning from home. But it was a window to, wow, this is how my child learns, or my child is actually connecting really well with math teacher, but is avoiding the science class. What is going on? Why those changes? And I see my child gets off the chair every 10 minutes for a break. Oh, wow. It turns out that he can't be focusing for so long. So I wonder how he does it in school. And no wonder, there's all these challenges in the school. Or my child has sensory issues that I didn't know before. We've had some kids who are actually doing better in remote learning than in school. Why is that? Is it because they're less anxious? Is it because they don't have all the sensory issues in the school? Is it? But let's gather that information from professionals, for everyone who's working with your child, from doctors, therapists, anybody who's in your child's team, and bring it to the team, bring it to the school, and speak up. And don't forget that your observations are as important as any other evaluation done by a professional. And then we go to the back to school. We need to prepare for this transition. We're all so happy and hip hooray, we're going back in person, yes, but it might not be as easy. We have, this is gonna be a huge transition for many of our kids, and especially for our kids with disabilities or special needs. It's after being home for a full year. Now I have to go into the classroom. I'm expected to be sitting down for 5-6 hours and paying attention to this one teacher and being surrounded by 20-25 other kids. For some students, that might be a lot to process. So how is that transition gonna look like? Let's have, again, communicate with the school. How is that gonna look like for my child? And again, for my child with his or her unique profile. It's not, this is what we're gonna do in second grade. No, this is what I need, what my second grader needs. And we have many kids who were not in special education before the pandemic. Well, we have now many kids with anxiety, with trauma. Many things happened this year. So it might be that your child is in a completely different situation going into the school now that where he or she was before a year ago. So find out, and let's maybe an evaluation, maybe talk to a therapist, maybe talk to the pediatrician and see if there's been any changes. Have you seen your child being more anxious or isolating? Or if you have seen any changes, let's go and find out what is going on. Reach out to professionals, reach out to the school, and maybe there's a new diagnosis. Maybe you have new concerns now that you didn't have before. So let's make sure that you can work with the school and prepare your student for a smooth transition into the classroom, understanding that it might not be as easy as we're all expecting it to be with the, so exciting to be back in person again. And then with the last one, I just wanted to highlight what Marie said before. Very well said, Marie. Speak up. You know your child better than anyone. If we're talking about expertise, you are the only, as a parent, you are the only expert on your child. And I know, like, we go to school meetings and we have the school psychologist and the teacher and or 2 or 3 teachers, and we have a bunch, a lot of school staff meeting with us, and I'm just there sitting as a mom, and I might feel overwhelmed. I might feel like, wow, they are the experts. They know all about this. But do not forget that in that room, in that meeting, on any meeting where you go to about your child's needs, you as parents, you are the expert and the one and only expert. So don't be shy and speak up. If you feel like the school is saying, well, he's fine, it's like, things are not going well at home. We're observing these behaviors. I'm seeing these struggles, and you are the only expert. So just trust yourself and speak up. And then for all parents, please know that we're a nonprofit. All our services are for free. Reach out to a helpline, even if you don't have a concern or things are going well, but you just have questions. And I wonder about this. I don't know about that. And I feel like this should be happening and it's not. Reach out to our helpline. We have a whole page on COVID-19, questions and answers, all the different guidelines from the Department of Education in terms of special education and school reentry and everything. Everything is in there. So please use our website for information. That's one thing that I always tell parents, information is powerful. Parents who are informed, who know the rights, you know, it's different the way you advocate for your child when you know what you're talking about. And as you were saying, Mary, you don't know what you don't know. So maybe you feel like, oh yeah, I got that. Yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. And then you go and read new information, or just pick up the phone and call the helpline and realize like, oh, I did not know that. And turns out that I can do A, B, or C. So always, always, always be that detective looking for all the information you can. We have monthly chats, both in English and Spanish. And the helpline is also, forgot to say, I'm sorry, the helpline, parents are welcome to come in any language. They can just leave a message and we'll call them back with an interpreter in any language. So families from all different backgrounds are welcome to call our helpline. And the monthly chats, again, is a way of staying in touch with the community and bringing new information, updated information on special education to all our families. And we also have the social media and groups on Facebook, one on autism and one for a Spanish-speaking community. So yeah, I think that's for me, short and simple, but I think very basic tips for all parents. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful, useful information. We so appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to introduce Brian McCann, who is principal of Case High School in Swansea, Massachusetts.
So thank you very much, Susan. So when Susan reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, I told her, I think you sent the email to the wrong person. I don't know what I would be doing on a PTA panel. And she said, no, you are the right person to be here. So I did a lot of listening this evening because I thought, advocacy, what do I do about advocacy on a daily basis? So I have to agree with a lot of the things that the senator said about finding our voice, using our voice. How about amplifying our voice as well? That is one thing that has really resonated, and also tell your story. So I'm just going to start with that. So I take my job very seriously, and being the principal of Joseph Case High School, actually Joseph Case High School is really the only place I've ever worked as an adult, almost. This is my 17th year being a high school principal there. I was an assistant for 4 years. I taught English and journalism there for 11 years. And then I graduated from Case High School too. So literally, except for going to college and grad school, it's really the only place I've ever worked. So I might not know what another school is, but I recognize that since I'm a product of the school, I'm probably the best model of the power of its education as well. And I take that very, very seriously. In fact, I tell loads of stories. And the stories are not always, you know, how fabulous I did or isn't this wonderful here. The best stories I ever told kids was when I failed at something. And not only do you model vulnerability that you failed at something, but what did I do with that failure? How did I overcome that failure and turned it into something positive? And in my 17 years, I got a lot of feedback, and you know, some of it's love, some of it's not so much love here. But they said the most important thing that their child told them that year is that the principal very early in the year told them that he didn't do well at something, but this is how he overcame that failure, and it gives kids hope. So us as models, whether you're a building leader or a teacher, we have the potential to have a superpower to change a kid's life at any second during the day. And we don't pretend that we have known what happens to kids 5 minutes before they arrive at school. That's why I do buses every day. And I have principal friends who kind of roll their eyes at that. I'm like, oh, isn't that quaint? And I think it's so important to watch a child get off the bus, because you know, if he or she or they are different than they were yesterday. It's really our first stage of triage for the day. Just that visual recognition. And you know how a person carries him, herself, themselves. That's very powerful to do that. And then after we do the buses, we go in the back of the school and watch the kids who come in from, you know, who drive to school. And it's the same thing. They think we're just saying, you know, good morning, Susie, good morning, Charlie. What we're really doing is triage from the second we get to school. I love the senator's word of triage, because when we broke after March 13th, that's all we've been honest to this very second. All we do is triage at school, because once something is set, and well, I throw away pens because we can only use pencils these days because things change. I mean, literally last Thursday on April Fool's Day, I got 2 announcements from the state. One that we're thinking of canceling MCAS for juniors if it passes, this, that, the other. This is after, you know, our plans have been in motion for months on this, and it really has upset everything when you were having 9th grade and 11th grade and AP testing at the same time. Okay, you're gonna take that off the plate. Well, that affects everything else. And then the whole prom thing, which I can't even go into because my head will explode. To think that giving me prom guidance on April 1st was a good idea when we had been using contracts signed for months. So we're in triage. We're in triage every day. I love the Massachusetts PTA, the moniker of changing what is into what should be, because I think that's what we did as educators after March 13th. You know, we had a couple days because this was all going to go in 2 weeks, right? We're going to have a kind of a 2-week waiting period where we all set after that. Then when we realized that we had to go from enrichment to kind of like, oh, we'll do a little catch up on the learning too. We better figure this out because we're on Zoom or Google Meets for the rest of the year. How do we change this atmosphere into what could be? So one thing I did, just like what the senator said or what Marie said about the communication, I put out a newsletter every day from March 13th, 14th, from the 16th on to the end of the year. Every day I did a newsletter. Every day I did a video, which I embedded into that newsletter, which talked about announcements. So I tried to recreate the school experience, but really from the living room I'm in now. What else can we do about what should be? Well, you know, the senators spoke about tell our story. What are we doing to tell our story in the school? What are we doing? And I would say social media is so important this day, because either you tell your story first or someone else is going to tell the story of your school. So you need to get ahead of it. And if you say, well, you know, as a building leader, I really don't do Twitter. It's time to start doing it. It's time. You're probably a good 7 years behind if you don't embrace social media to tell your school story. And I don't do it perfectly, but I'm active on it. And you can look at Joseph Case HS on Twitter here. I think you have a pretty good idea of what the school is, what the school culture is, a culture of risk-taking where relationships are prioritized. But we take very seriously Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram in order to tell the school story. And because of that, then when the newspapers and people still read newspapers, they might not read them, be delivered to the house, but they do read them online. And so when you have events, national events or state events here, the newspapers will call me, or the TV stations will call me, because they know we have a presence on there, because we know that they have an idea what our story is already. So that has been a learning curve for me in the past 5 years here. But I so agree with what the senator said about modeling and risk taking here. Now, in terms of advocacy, I'd like to give parents 3 things to think about at this time: patience, flexibility, and grace. It's so important. I'm looking at it from my perspective. The principal of the high school should not be the first call you're making if you have a question or if you have a problem here. If you're going to call me about a quiz that your child had in math, I probably don't know anything about it. And you need to start with the teacher. And if you're not happy with that answer, the department head, the guidance counselor, there's assistant principals. There is a chain of command, but it doesn't start with me, because when you call me, I'm just going to direct you with grace to the right person for that job here. I'd love for parents to know we are doing the best we can. I am a school administrator. I feel I work 7 days a week because I'm answering questions on email all the time. Yes, I do have the option of not picking up my phone and looking at my email. So then I could have a Monday morning of 7,000 emails right at 7:30 rather than just kind of manage them over the weekend. If the state comes out with a new idea on Thursday, please don't email me on Friday morning saying, what's the school's plan? Because I don't know. Because like every other school, we are in a period of reflection and thinking, I thought we just kind of solved this here. I think anyway, please be patient with us. When a plan is, detailed, we'll disseminate it to you in a timely fashion, but know that everything now is in pencil and limestone. It will change. It will change. What else? I know I'm pressed for time here. Oh, I love process, not an event. Patience. So I think the best thing I can do for children in advocacy is model that for them, to find something you want to change and show them how to do it. I'll give one example here. About 5 years ago, I said, why do we still have final exams? Why do we still have final exams at the high school? Because I had them at the high school? That's not a good reason. Find me one college. Find me one college that starts in September, ends in June, and the final exam is worth 20% or 15% or 10%. But if you do this, that, and the other thing, you don't have to take it. That's not the purpose of final exams, is it? So we cancel them. We have 4 quarterly exams. Guess what? We get all the data you want. We have the data that your kid did well in in the past term, and he or she, they are prepared to succeed in the next part of their adventure here. They finished Spanish 2 and they're rearing to go now for Spanish 3. We have all that data. And you know what we do at that time? We gave half days for teachers to share a passion with their students. And that's how we ended our year. We've ended the past 3 school years, not so much last year, with passion days, and it's been wonderful. We continue to build relationships at Joseph Case High School, even on the last day of school. So if that's not modeling what risk taking and trying to change something in a system which is antiquated and really has no purpose in the 21st century education, and there's schools that will say I'm wrong, okay, but I think we're doing a good job at Case High School. Anyway, that's a little bit about me here. I don't know. I don't even know if I answered any questions here. I think I just talked a lot about me here. What comparison? Please be gentle with me when you call. Please be gentle with me. Please do not go on social media into the real this or the true this of your town and talk all about how terrible I am, because my mother will read it and then she calls me up and say, Brian, what are you doing? And we don't have that back and forth. I'm not going to go on that social media and say, what are you talking about? We've had 37 phone calls about this. You just didn't like the answer. So I'd say be gentle. Be gentle with your school departments as well. We're not the bad guys here. We want your children to succeed too. We really do. Anyway. I'd be more than happy to answer questions. Susan's shaking her head thinking, yeah, why did I invite Brian McCann? He had nothing good to say on this whole thing here. Anyway,
that's absolutely not true. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
Anyway, Power of Storytelling, March issue, Principal Leadership Magazine here. They I have the cover story on the Power of Storytelling. So
I have that link from Brian. I will share it with all of you.
Thank you.
I will share that. Thank you again. And at this time, I'd like to ask Adeline B. to give her presentation.
All right. Thank you, Susan, very much. Thank you, Paul, Marie, Laura, Brian. Wow, what a lot of information. The PTA offering this is an opportunity, especially since it's being recorded, that will help a lot of parents. Just a little bit about me. I'm a recently retired 30+ year English teacher on all levels. I have taught elementary, middle school, high school, and college. I have served on the Mass Teachers Association Board of Directors and their Executive Council. I currently serve on the MTA Candidate Recommendation Committee. I've been active politically since I was 16. That is another story for another time, though. Tonight, I'm going to share a different story with you. Thank you, Paul. When I was 19, I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in education. I never dreamed that that degree would one day help me to advocate for my own child. 14 years later, as I looked down at my beautiful baby boy, I had no idea how difficult the next 18 years would be. That little boy began running at 9.5 months. He had stitches in his head at 16 months on Christmas Eve. He was twirling too fast and fell, dancing to Disney's "You're Never Too Old to Be Young." He hated nursery school. He definitely had temper tantrums. He was a smart little boy, but when it came time to learn the alphabet, letter sounds, words, then sentences, he was way behind. We were a family that read. Every day, every night, I read to my son. He watched Disney movies. He loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He listened to classical music with his grandmother, and he talked up a storm. But he hated school because he was different. And years later, I found out from him that he'd been teased. During kindergarten, he was tested by the school and Boston Children's Hospital due to issues in the classroom and his lack of learning. After almost a full year, the diagnosis came back. My son had ADHD and was slightly dyslexic. He was put on medication, and my awkward advocacy meetings with the school administration and teachers began. You know, the IEP road, the pathway. You've probably experienced it if you're a special needs parent. Every year, there were more meetings, direct clashes. I knew my son was smart, but the school was insisting he be pulled out of his classes. I fought them every step of the way because as a teacher, I knew that once a child is pulled out, he begins to miss out on information he may never regain. Eventually, we reached a compromise. And during elementary school, my son was pulled out for speech and reading, but stayed in the classroom for math and social studies and science. He chose to stop taking medication in the 5th grade because it made him feel different. Focusing became harder for him, and we worked on that through sports, where he did excel. It's so important that every child have at least one place where he or she or they can excel or feel important. My son's grades were average to below average, but as he graduated from each level, they began to improve. By high school, he went to a really fabulous vocational school, and those grades were mainly B's and C's, with the occasional A. In our family, going to college was not an option. It was simply part of the educational process. So he attended Daniel Webster College, a small college in New Hampshire, where he could receive support. And he began Air Force ROTC at that time. His grades improved, but I, as the English teacher, was still proofing his writing assignments and trying to get him to remember the basic rules, such as I before E except after C. I never just edited his work. I made him go back and correct it. And in the margin was the rule. I hoped those rules would eventually stick. For the next 4 years, most of his grades were B's, occasional A or C. He eventually graduated with both an associate's in flight and a bachelor's in aviation management and was sworn into the Air Force as a lieutenant serving as a weapons system officer, or WISO, on B-1s. A dream come true for a little boy who too often had cried in my lap because school was just too hard. Later, he went back to school and he earned a master's degree, this time a perfect 4.0. But once again, I was proofing his papers. His dyslexia is still there, especially with numbers. He doesn't recognize the difference between county and country, or where and were. My son is now a major, and we've talked about his schooling. He's told me that the difference in his learning really began when he knew it was a life and death matter. He focused more because it could mean someone's survival. He's also told me that he knows when he needs help and asks for it. One of my lessons did stick. Everyone learns differently. And if I hadn't advocated for my son all those years ago, I don't know where he'd be today. The continuation of that story is my grandson, who's exhibiting many of the same problems my son had. Once again, I am advocating through my son and his wife, but now as a grandmother for my family. I can't tell you how important it is to read everything that comes home from school about your child and to question anything you don't agree with. Your children need you to advocate for them. And that's why we're here tonight, to help and give you the tools to make that happen. Remember, PTA is here for you. Just ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Adeline. Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you for sharing that story. At this time, we are going to ask our audience for any questions. I don't know if we have, there are certain people who are looking for questions or have some questions.
I do have one, probably specifically geared towards Brian, and you kind of touched upon this, but can you go a little bit more into detail about kind of the communication with parents during the COVID realm? And I know you said your newsletter, which I commend you for doing it every day, but is there anything that you can kind of tell us about specifically relating to parent communication or even your employee communication?
Well, the newsletter, so before that, it went out, I wouldn't say every week, every 2 weeks, definitely. And maybe some slow times every 3 weeks here. And since the pandemic here, I mean, it went out every day and through June. And then this year, it goes out every Friday. And I don't differentiate what I tell parents and students and teachers. It's one newsletter, so everyone's on an equal playing field. Because I think they all will benefit that, or given the opportunity to, you know, to have the same information here. I use a platform which is called Some More. I don't know if other people use it. It's a simple. There is a free version of Some More, like Some More, like, you know, like graham cracker and marshmallow. There's a free version, but if you're a school administrator, I pay I don't know what it is a year, I forget now, $80, $75 a year, because it is exponentially better, and you get metrics with it, which is nice. I can tell you how many families read my newsletter every week. So that's great information. No, I'm like, is it just me? Is it just me and my wife who are reading the newsletter? But routinely, out of a school of 550 kids, I have, I don't know, 450 or so families read it every week. That's great. And they know where to find it, and it's something. It's dependable, Madison. It's routine. They know on Friday they're going to get it in the you know, mid to late afternoon, and it's their point of reference. The nice thing about Some More is if there is information that is changing, or, you know, there's a word I misspelled, like I missed it, and the two other people that look at it missed it. I can change it, and since it's cloud-based, it's sometimes I can insert pictures, which is awesome, because the pictures are just as important as the text. I can put in calendars, I can put in hyperlinks, I can put in video. So it's really a very, very robust forum there. So I think it's with the regularity and that it's easy to use. And again, I'm modeling my expectations for families. You know, one thing that the senator talked when he talked about Simon there was about asking your why. I don't know about your school. Did any schools go like through the like, my kids aren't turning on their cameras. What are you going to do about it, Brian? Right? We've heard those things. And I was like, well, have you told the kids why? Have you told the kids why you want to, turn on the camera? And the same thing with kids. My teacher's making me turn on. I'm like, have you asked them why? And really, when we just really for the beginning of the term 3, everyone's like, you just tell them why they should turn on the cameras, and it doesn't that you'd like to see their face, that it's easier to teach to, to people rather than kind of, Google images. But it's okay to share with them that, as educators, we're mandated reporters. We want to see that you're safe. Right? We want to see that you're good. We want to see that you're happy, or we want to see that you need some extra help, and see what can we do. So I think when we tell people they're why, I couldn't agree more with the senator. I'm your biggest fan tonight, Senator. That we need to tell people the why. And getting back to your question, Madison, about the newsletter, I think when you have a regular newsletter with information, you are giving all your stakeholders, including your parents, and families, your why.
As a follow-up, Brian, do you think parent engagement has increased since you're increasing the number of times a month that you're sending out a newsletter?
I certainly don't get the feedback like, we don't know what's going on in the school. Again, sometime when the news breaks and that you hear about it on, Channel 4, and they're like, what are we doing about that? And we just haven't figured it out yet. So, but on the whole, if you want to find out anything, just look on the newsletter. It's all there. And it's not just me. I mean, anyone can. I have different groups. I've even with our local special education parents advocacy committee here. They send me their flyers. It goes into the newsletter. So it's another great way of getting messages from various stakeholders. So it's not just people who are in my building Monday through Friday, that we use it for a variety of reasons for our stakeholders. So yeah, I think I've had my numbers have been consistent really in the high 400s right along here. So there hasn't been any drop, and no, I'm not putting anyone to sleep with it or anything like that. It's all good information, and sometimes it's the same information, a couple weeks down the road. So now how can we embrace it even more? That's our next challenge.
Mm-hmm.
You're muted, Jackie. And then we have Wendy.
Thank you. I have a question. I'd like to follow up on something that Maria St. Fleur indicated, and I'd like to direct it to Paul Feeney. Paul, first of all, thank you so very much for representing us in the State Senate. I know of your work. I've gotten to meet you through the Advocacy Committee, and I'm really very proud and I'm pleased that you're here. But I'd like to bring up the question that Maria said regarding the money coming for this year only and spend it so that it will last. Really? Why not continue? Because we do know that there are so many problems out there, and they did exist even before the COVID. Like Adeline, though I'm older, I'm not just recently retired, I'm a retired educator also. Okay, again, K through middle school, and now adjunct professor at Bunker Hill Community College. It is so apparent, particularly for our immigrant children and families, particularly for our brown and black families, those who are bilingual, and English is not their first language. I yield from Everett, your buddy Sal DiDomenico. So I'm going to ask the question. Thank you, we need this money for this year. But thank you, we need this money for the next 10 years. Is there anything, and I know that we're going to have to go to the national level, but is there anybody talking at the State House about, okay, so how can we get this? I mean, what do we do about that? Because Maria reminds me so much of my parents that I had while I was school counseling K-6 and when I taught 6th grade. I understand. And the same for Laura. Laura, you couldn't have said it more succinct. Perfect. You are our partner and you have been the first teacher of your children. What can we do to extend that? And I would be in favor of raising taxes.
First of all, thank you. You're 1,000% right. And it's great to see you again. I know, I'm sure Senator DiDomenico wishes he was on and could talk to you. He has been a
Yeah.
great champion, as we all
Yes, it
know,
has.
not only for education, but really, just lifting kids out of poverty and making sure that we're taking care of families throughout the Commonwealth. First of all, you're right. When we look at this influx of cash that's coming from the federal program, the ARP, which was recently signed into law, we still don't know what strings are going to be attached to that, right? We know there is kind of a bucket of money that's being used for municipalities that's going as direct aid to cities and towns. We're still trying to figure out with the federal delegation and the folks in Washington on what that actually means, what that money can be spent on. Does it have to be COVID related for cities and towns? Can you use that to make up for revenue shortfalls and things like that? So there's all sorts of questions that still remain on a local level about, the federal money and what that can be used for. We know that at a state level, we're going to have a significant influx of funding that we can use for certain things. We're still unsure, again, what the parameters are going to be around that spending. But it's important to focus, and I think Marie said it right. It's important to focus on that. Of course, we need to make up for a shortfall that we've had over the last year, but we need to also recognize the fact that we have been upside down as far as education spending for the last 20 years, right?
Right.
And then some.
And more.
And more, right? And when
I
we
started teaching in 1970. Many of these
Right.
people weren't even born then, but go ahead.
Yeah, when we passed the Student Opportunity Act last
Right.
session,
Right.
we talked about the Chapter 70, the foundation formula, the funding for that formula. That was last updated when I was a freshman at Don Bosco High School in Boston, and
Yeah.
that was many, many years ago and a lot of hair ago when that was adjusted. So, we as a legislature finally came to the realization that we have to do this, and it was long overdue. We did it. And then, of course, with all these grand plans, then the rug gets pulled out from under us with COVID, literally the first year of funding. Most of us in the legislature, and I say most of us because these are discussions that are going to happen and everybody's going to weigh in on their priorities. I think most of us understand that we need to do everything we can to hold the SOA funding harmless, so that regardless of whatever type of downturn we enter into, and it looks, more positive by the day now as we start to reopen, but that we need to hold that harmless and continue to fund that at the levels that we promised, right? When we talk about special education, circuit breaker funding for transportation, cities and towns have been telling us for years and years and years that this is necessary. When we talk about, charter school reimbursements and getting to that 100% in our communities, all these commitments that we made as a legislature with all the stakeholders at the table, we need to be able to fund that. Now, the governor's budget early this year, there's some questions on whether or not it fully funds it. Certainly the advisories and press releases state that it does. I think you'll find a lot of us believe that it doesn't. We've noticed some little quirks in the formula where gateway cities, like in my district of Attleboro, that they're not getting anywhere near what they should be getting based on that formula. And the big thing that we're facing now, and this is something that we're going to have to keep our eye on, is the enrollment numbers, the decline in enrollment,
Yeah.
that we've seen in the last year because of COVID. Well, these students didn't just disappear into thin air, right? We know that they're coming back, and we know that we have to make sure that, people like Brian McCann and others in our schools have the resources necessary when the students do return. So that's something we got to keep our eye on. I would just say keep advocating for the Student Opportunity Act funding. We made a commitment. We should meet that commitment, and that has to be a part of every budget going forward from this year, until we're fully funded.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. It's great
Let
to
us
see you.
know how we can help. We want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria, for bringing it up.
Wendy?
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations tonight. They've been wonderful and informative, and I'm really happy I've been able to be part of this. My point just goes back to the storytelling, and just an anecdote I wanted to share when we talk about advocacy and reaching out to teachers and principals and guidance counselors and so on and so forth is, from a parent's point of view, I think it's important that as much as we know our children and believe what we're doing and saying is right and is important, it's also important to listen to the other members of the team, so to speak. And I just recall many years ago, my daughter's almost 30 now, and she's a successful adult. But I remember when she was in high school, I went to one of her parent-teacher conferences, and I was a little upset because I wasn't happy with what I thought was her lack of effort. And I thought her grades didn't reflect her potential. And that was my focus. That was all I wanted to talk about. And what I could do as her parent to make her focus on what was so important. And one of the teachers sort of set me back in a very gentle way, but they said, maybe what you don't know about your daughter is she's one of the first ones in class who makes sure that the person who feels left out is included. And maybe you don't know what she's doing socially and how she's interacting with her peers. And I felt a little chastened because that was not on my radar. That's not what I was focused on. And but that's a huge part of who she is, and a huge part of why she's a successful adult now is because she does care and she's really good with people. So I just think that it's important that we do try to work as a team to achieve what's best for our children and listen to each other with respect and an open mind. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think this was fabulous, and I definitely think we might need a part 2 at some point with all 5 of you back, including, Susan as the moderator. I personally thought it was fabulous, and I know by the comments and head nods and thumbs up, everyone would say the same, and I can't wait for people to be able to see this recording. So, Susan, any last words?
Well, again, this just concludes our advocacy panel discussion at this time. And like Madison said, I'll just echo it. We are so appreciative. And just remember, it will be recorded. It'll be posted on Massachusetts PTA website. And to all of our panelists, thank you so much. We really appreciate your spending this time with us this evening. And anyone else can contact us with any follow-up questions, and we'll be sure to get them to the panelists. And if you wanted to contact PTA with any follow-up questions again, or if you wanted to contact the PTA about becoming a member and becoming involved in helping us to advocate, we're always looking for volunteers, right?
I know, I see some potential committee members, maybe even on this panel. I'm just kidding.
I'm so happy about that. So thank you very much. And to the 5 panelists, if you could stick around just so Stephanie could grab that photo, that would be fabulous. So Stephanie, I'm not sure how exactly you want that to happen at this point. You want us all to just leave the meeting and you grab it, or just put our cameras off? What are you looking for?
So, yeah, so if you you want to shut your cameras off, who doesn't want to be in the picture,
Okay.
I am going to try to
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
adjust this. Bye, thank you. Sorry, just takes a second here.
All right, so Steph, are you, I think the booster guy left. Do you want me to hold on before you do it? I just want to see if, because I can leave. Yeah, you're a co-host. All right, you're good if I go.
I'm gonna hide non-video participants is what I'm doing.
Great. Okay.
So now I need to shut my video off. There we go. All right, great. I've got everybody.
Nice smile.
1, 2, 3, PTA. Okay, and hold on, let me just double check myself as I paste it over here. Fabulous. I think it's thumbs up for everybody. You're all wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for having it.
everyone.
Great to see
Thank
all
you.
of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sue.
Marie.
Good night.
Love
Take
you.
care, Paul.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
See all of
take
you.
care.
Take
Laura,
care.
good to hear from
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye
Susan.
now.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Susan. Bye-bye.